Welcome to the 401k Audit CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping companies across the United States prepare for their 401k audit. If you have 100 eligible participants in your 401k plan, then this podcast is for you.
Welcome, everyone. This is Kim, and we are here for the 401k Audit CPA Success Show, our monthly podcast recording. I have Karen Hill with me, the audit manager here at Summit/Anders. And I'm Kim Moore. I'm the audit director here. As we talked about in our last podcast last month, Summit was purchased by Anders, and so we merged together at the beginning of April. As we're recording this, it's now about middle of May. So we've been a part of Anders for a month and a half. We're going to continue our podcasts. If anybody was wondering about that, podcast will continue just as before, same 401k audit kind of presentation as before, but we're hoping to get some additional folks to join us for these podcasts going forward. So, but for this month, you have Karen and myself. And the topic this month, we're going to talk about the Secure Act 2.0. If you have been listening to our podcasts over the past year or so, there was a Secure Act that was passed back, I believe it was the end of 2019, became effective in 2020. And it's Congress's way of trying to kind of update retirement plans for the future, knowing that defined benefit plans went away for the most part for most employed folks. And so they don't really want people to just be relying on Social Security as their only income source when they get to retirement. And they know most people want to retire. So the alternative really is an employer-sponsored 401k contributory plan. There's other things out there, and we're not going to get into all of the different structures. We're going to focus for this podcast pretty much 401k contributory plans. But anyways, that Secure Act 1.0, it was actually labeled Secure Act, which I believe is setting every community up for retirement, I believe is what that stands for. And it really changed some rules to make it easier for people to get into plans, extended RMD rules. There were a few other things that were baked into that Secure Act, but they didn't get all the provisions in that they wanted with the first go-round, which is pretty common for congressional bills. So they're doing a kind of a second go-round here to try to get the remaining items that they really want to get included into the bill, but it'll be a separate bill, and it's basically called Secure Act 2.0. Little bit about kind of where we are with this. The House of Representatives actually has been working on this, and they passed a bill. It was actually HR 2954, if you want to look that up. It was passed at the end of March of this year, and it is now over with the Senate to take a look at it. Senate is, it's the usual process. They're going to review, come up with their differences, and then they'll either pass the bill back. A couple of different things could happen. They could pass the bill back. They could do an entirely different bill, or they could agree to send it for a vote, which probably won't happen. There'll probably be some changes, and then they'll go through a reconciliation process. So it's not law yet, not a done deal, but we wanted to talk about what's in the major provisions of the bill, because it does have some pretty big implications for those of you that either are a 401k plan participant, or if you are the plan sponsor, most importantly, of a 401k plan. We wanted to kind of keep you updated, so this doesn't hit you as a surprise, because we do believe it's going to become law. It's just a matter of when and exactly what's included in the bill. So I'm going to start off with what I think is kind of the biggest piece of it, is requiring companies. Now, there's a couple of caveats here that we'll come back to, but for the most part, companies that are big enough are going to have a 401k plan, and they're going to have to do auto enroll. Karen, you want to talk a little bit about what auto enroll is and how, just in general, how that works?
Well, auto enroll means that when the employee becomes eligible to participate in the plan, they are automatically enrolled at a certain percentage unless they opt out. Usually the percentage is 3%, and they also usually give them a little bit of a cushion. So if you're eligible upon hire, they'll go ahead and put you in the plan, but usually you have a little bit of a cushion, like, okay, you need to go and opt out. But usually it's not very long, couple weeks, maybe a month.
Right.
They give you time to opt out, and then if you don't opt out, they go ahead and automatically enroll you, and you'll have the deferrals will be taken out of the participant's paycheck. And this really does work to increase the enrollment, because just like a lot of employees don't enroll in the plan because I don't want to call it laziness, but it's just kind of like, whatever. It seems to be the same thing with the opt out. With the plans that we've audited that have had automatic enrollments, it very often they have a lot of participants that they're contributing at that auto enroll rate and into the default fund.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's been our experience. So I think what Congress wants to happen once this goes into effect probably will happen. I think there will be
Yeah.
a lot of people that will be participating in a plan that wouldn't have otherwise. Probably
hmm
companies will offer plans that hadn't offered them before because they'll be required to. Um,
hmm
the opt out or the auto enrollment requires it to start per the current law. Now, keep in mind everything we're going to say here is not law yet, so it's subject to change, obviously, as it goes through its review by the Senate and then the reconciliation process. But the current law requires it to start at a minimum of 3% of salary. So that would mean a company starting up a new plan, or if they already have a plan that doesn't have auto enrollment, they'd have to put this feature in. They would have to start it at 3%. So 3% of an employee's salary would automatically be deferred every pay period, um, up to 10%. So they could actually start it at a higher number. They could start at 5, start right at 5 instead of 3 or 6, up to 10%. It also requires an auto increase feature. So if you started at the 3%, that's fine first year. The next year, then you're going to auto enroll folks at the 3%, but those that were in the plan for a year are going to get bumped up to 4%. And the same thing. Next year would bump up another percent, up to 10%. Now, obviously, there's options within that. So if you want to start at 5, that's fine, and then you'd roll everybody up to 6% the next year. You could have an option available for people to contribute more than 10%. So it's not like it's limiting you to 10%, but it's just
hmm
saying you have to do within this 3 to 10, and you have to bump it up till it gets to the 10%. Um, you can do other things as well, just like you could today. So you could have flat dollar amount contributed. I mean, there's
hmm
other things you can do that you can do today. This is just saying you have to at least do this. Um, it does provide in the provision, as Karen mentioned, the opt-out option that is included in the law. So at any point in time, if an employee participant said, I don't want to participate anymore, they can opt out at any time. They can also opt out of that increase. So if you start them at 3%, the next year you're going to bump them up to 4. The employee feels like 4% is too much. Either I want to stop contributing or I want to go back to the 3. They can opt out of the increase as well. So that is allowed in the law, which I think is a good thing, because 3% of a salary is a lot different, at least it feels like to me, than 10%. I don't.
Yeah.
I know it's not a lot, but it kind of sounds like a lot. Feels like a
Yeah.
lot.
Well, I think with the increase, usually there's been usually people they get increases in salaries in wages every year as well. So if you're only bumping it up by 1%, it's a good way to get them up to that 10%, which is a better number, higher number, so they actually have some decent savings for retirement
Right.
without it coming. I mean, because yeah, at 3%, they probably aren't going to notice as much, especially since it comes out before tax. It's going to
Right.
lower their tax burden. So, it's not going to seem like a whole lot with 3%. If you started with 10%, that might. So,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
that increase is one way. It is a good way to get people to
Mm-hmm.
save more.
And I totally agree with you, Karen. I think as you get your salary increase each year, it's more doable, I guess.
Yeah.
Better, not way to put it, that you may not feel it as much because you're getting an increase. It'll just be
Mhm.
less of an increase because part of it will go to that increase in the 401k. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it kind of all pans out. If it ends up, staying this way, and how people react to it. I'm not sure. I mean, we've seen it kind of both ways. We've seen the certainly it increases participation. We've also seen plans where they have a lot of fairly low compensated employees.
Mhm.
And so they're only putting in a few dollars at a time. And so it really, you can end the year of full year of participation, especially if there's no match, with only
Right.
$100 or something saved, which $100 better than zero, but still it's not very much. It's not not
No.
what you'd want to live on. So
No. No. And
so
yeah, and you really though starting with 3%, and of course it depends on how much the person makes, but I recall um the saying that if you save $2,000 a year, which really isn't a whole lot when you think about it, for your first 10 years, like in your 20s, and didn't put in anything more, you end up with more at retirement than if you start in your 30s
right, right.
because
Yeah,
of the cost. So this would be a good way, especially some of those younger workers who don't think about it, get them started, and then they're not scrambling as much when they get into their 40s and 50s and thinking, "Oh wow, I haven't saved anything for retirement yet."
right, right. Yeah, very good point. Another part of the law that will help, I think, smaller employers, there
Mhm.
is an opt out or a excluded employers. If you're a very small employer, um, you're not required to participate in this. And then there's also exclusions for things like churches, and I think other not-for-profits are excluded.
Yeah.
So again, um, it's 10 or fewer employees for small businesses, and those that are
That part
less.
could change. That could be something
Yeah,
one of the part of the provision that changes. What is a small employer?
right, right. Yeah. So I guess watch this space if you're a really small company and you're thinking, oh no, I'm now I'm going to have the administrative fees associated with this plan. So I guess watch this space. We'll keep you posted, and I do regular blog postings each week, and definitely this is something I'm following. So as more information comes out, or if that changes, certainly be putting that in the blog. So watch that, because I agree with Karen that those details are the things that'll probably change.
Mhm.
They do have a provision in the law though for those folks that are going to have to set up a plan and they're relatively small. There's tax credits that can go back to the employer for setting up the plan, and again, I think these details will all probably change, but currently it's $1,000 tax credit, not a deduction, but a credit in the first year that you're setting the plan up, and then you get continuing credits over the next few years. I think it goes over 5 years currently, which helps to offset the administrative costs of setting up a
Mhm.
plan because it's not so expensive, and there's a lot of cheaper options out there for employers to set up brand new plans, especially if they're smaller. You don't have to go with a big fancy, you know, big plan with a lot of bells and whistles. You can do a pretty simple, straightforward plan. Not a lot of ongoing fees and costs, just depending on how you set it up. But there is setup fees initially. So this is meant to help offset that, to help you, so it's not this big burden on the employer. So I think that's a good thing. Another option that is currently in this law, which they've been talking about for a long time, is that they are really worried about part-time employees.
Mhm.
Traditionally, part-time employees are, or can be, not always, but can be excluded kind of from the get-go with participation in a 401k plan. A lot of employers just kind of exclude them. If you don't have 30 hours a week or so many hours a year, there's usually some type of eligibility requirement around hours. And the part-time people usually don't hit enough hours to allow them to participate. So big concern on the congressional side with that, especially for longer term part-time employees. So not somebody who's working part-time maybe a seasonal employee that only comes every so often and helps you out,
Mhm.
but a more permanent part-time employee, which of course, in our workforce, we have a lot of those right now. I have two working for me on the team
Mhm.
currently. So this provides for those folks to be included in the plan. Now, details around that we don't really have yet, and probably we'd need to see the regulations that the Department of Labor would put in regarding this. But something to keep in mind, and we mentioned this on our Secure Act prior podcast, if you have a lot of seasonal and or part-time employees, you you're probably going to have to start tracking their hours and keep it on a spreadsheet or something, because once this goes in, it may do a look back period. And obviously, if you haven't been keeping track of that, that could be a
Mhm.
lot of work for you. So just something to keep in mind. Um, more details to come on that. We talked about this also. This has been kind of a fluctuating area. RMDs, required minimum distributions. I don't know, Karen, you want to give a little bit of basic information about what RMDs are?
Required minimum distributions are for those participants that have reached, well, it used to be 70 and a half, I believe, with the CARES Act, it went up to 71 and a half, or you could be suspended even for a year. But
Mm-hmm.
once you reach that age, you need to at least start taking a minimum amount out of your 401k account. So usually whoever the third party administrator is, they usually can help you keep track of that, and they're well aware that that's going on. But that's that's one of the distributions that's required, and they're talking about raising the age for various reasons. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I mean, everybody used to retire 62, 65. Now there's more people, the retirement age is more like 67. So
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense to raise that age.
Yeah. Yeah, and people are living longer, people are working
Hmm.
longer. So you can always take a distribution earlier. This isn't saying that
Hmm.
if you want to retire at 65 and again, depending on your plan provisions, of course,
Hmm.
this isn't going to restrict saying, well, no, you got to wait till 75. You can certainly take it earlier,
Hmm.
but this is saying those required distributions
Right.
won't have to start as early as they would have. And the other thing with this is that because people are living longer, once they're starting to draw down out of their 401k, they are going to need it to last longer.
Hmm.
And so that's a concern, is that they don't want you to get into an older age and now you've used up all your money. Yeah, you had a great plan, but you lived a little longer and you outlived your savings. So that's another reason why that's in there. It's raising it up to 75. Again, watch this space, because this has been all over the place, as Karen kind of mentioned. It was
Hmm.
one number and then it was another number and then they suspended it for COVID, and then so it's kind of like what's the age limit today on the
Hmm.
RMD. So we'll see how it ends up. I think once this gets finalized, it'll probably settle at whatever age that they end up with, unless something else happens. We have
Hmm.
another pandemic or something. But I think if it ends
Hope
up at
not.
75, yeah, we're all hoping not. But if it ends up at 75, I think it'll probably settle there. It'll probably stay at
Hmm.
75 for a while. I don't think they're going to be jerking it around like they have the last few years. But currently, it's set at 75 in this law. It does have a kind of a provision that it doesn't go to 75 immediately. It's kind of a staggered over the next few years, assuming that this gets passed into law this year. So it's not an immediate change. Just they're trying to take in consideration those people that are, in this age bracket. They don't want to just make a big fall off change for them. They're trying to give them some time to adjust to it, and as well as the providers, because it falls a lot on your record keeper, as to their tracking it and being able to make sure they're in compliance. So more, we'll watch the space. More to come on this, but definitely if you're getting closer to retirement, something that you'll probably want to keep track of, because it will definitely impact you over the next few years. It the This new proposed law would increase catch-up amounts to $10,000 for those age 50 and older. I mean, currently there are catch-up allowances, and most plans allow for
Hmm.
catch-up. So once you get to age 50, you can start contributing more, anticipating that you're going to be, retiring over the next, 10, 20 years. Um, and so this is allowing you to contribute even a little more, which I think is a good thing. And of course, not
Mhm.
forcing you. This is totally optional, just as catch up is today. It just allows that amount to get higher. So I
Yeah.
think that's
So,
good.
and that's a pretty big jump. It's increased in the past. Usually it's been $500 a year though. So this
Hmm.
this is a fairly large jump.
Yeah,
If it
yeah. And I think for those who, are on the higher end of the compensation, it's a good thing.
Mhm.
Letting you put more
Yeah.
money in as you get closer, if you can, I think is a good thing. Um,
Yes.
this next thing is has been a big topic of conversation, and I mean, you've probably heard student loans in the news a lot, and the problems with younger folks and their ability to repay those student loans and the debt that they accumulate. So there is a provision in the plan around student loans. It's an attempt to do a couple of things. One, to help the student loan situation, just to allow folks to continue paying on their student loans. But one of the things that the congressmen were men and women were hearing is that for younger folks, it was very difficult for them to start contributing to 401k plan because any money that they had to go towards repaying their loan. So they didn't have any extra money to be able to make a deferral into a 401k plan. And they felt like, well, we can't really fix that problem so much. But the provision in this law allows an employer to factor into their plan a provision that they can, the individual, the younger, I mean, this could be anybody, but focused on
Mhm.
younger people, can make their payments towards their student loan, just like they're doing today. Now, administratively, how this is exactly going to work, I don't know. But the
Mhm.
employer then would give them credit as a deferral, not money, but just a credit into their plan, um, as a deferral amount for that student loan payment, and then they would match whatever the match setup is in the plan. So, as an example, if I was going to contribute $500 this month as a deferral into my plan, and let's say the employer matched half of that, so they would put in $250. So at the end of that month, I would have an addition to my plan account of $750. The person that was doing the loan, they would make that $250 loan payment separately, would not go into the plan. That would just happen just like it does today. The employer would look at that and say, you made your $500 loan repayment, so I'm going to match that to the $250, just like they would have had that been an elective deferral. So it's a way for the younger folks, or as long as you're making loan repayments, I guess, to continue to at least have a 401k plan, have contributions going in. It would be the match component only, and it would be to whatever match level the plan allows for. Obviously, this is not dictating what that match formula is going to be. That's up to the employer. And there would be the same match formula that they're using for everybody else, but it would allow younger folks to accumulate some money in their 401k account, which I know has been a real hot button for a lot of folks. They really like this. So I don't know, Karen, any thoughts on that?
Um, this is going to probably be a little bit more difficult for the employer administratively. I guess what they'll have to do is do almost like they're going to, because the loan payments are not made anywhere with the payroll system. So it's not something that they can easily track.
Right.
They would have to submit the evidence that they made the loan payments. I don't know if that's,
Yeah, I agree. I
I,
don't know how it's
yeah,
going to work.
yeah,
It's a great
I,
concept.
yeah, yeah, which I guess it shouldn't
Yeah.
surprise me that they have an idea and really don't know
Yeah,
how it's
can't
going to work.
they haven't figured that part out, and Congress won't. They'll just turn that over to the Department of Labor, and then the Department of Labor will probably punt it over to the record keepers, and record keepers will be, oh crap, now I got to figure out how I'm going to make this work. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. I mean, I would think I guess I was very fortunate. I didn't have to have a student loan, so I don't really know. I'm assuming the loan payments are the same every month, so maybe you submit documentation up
Hmm.
front, and then you would have to tell them if it changes, and then they would just every month um, give you a credit, I guess, and and
Yeah.
then do a match based on whatever that amount was. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how. I mean, you're absolutely right. They're completely separate processes. So
I mean,
you're not. It's not through payroll, and it's not through the record keeper at all. It's completely
and
different.
it's not even like when I did have student loans. They weren't very much, but I paid by check. They don't
Hmm.
pay by check anymore.
Right. Right. Yeah. So
So it's not like I can just show a canceled check. See, I made my loan payment.
right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if maybe you could give them maybe they'll require a bank statement at the end of the year and they'll do a match at the end of the year,
Yeah,
based on that or
maybe.
something. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they'll structure it. It's going to be interesting, um, to see how it goes. Like we've said, I don't think Congress has thought they don't think through the details of anything. They just pass the
Yeah.
law and then it's up to everybody else to administer it. So, um, I guess watch this space. This was talked about with the first Secure Act, and it was in various stages of the bill, and then it got pulled out. Like I said, it's a hot button issue, and there's other kind of things factoring into it, and so they just couldn't come to an agreement, and so it got pulled out. It's back again, so
Hmm.
we'll see if it ends up in the final bill or not. I don't know. I can see the reasoning behind it, and I can see why it's very attractive. And it could be very attractive to employers because I think if you could offer to younger employees who, we all know it's hard to get talent right now. So, I mean, this would be one more thing that you could offer to somebody that, not only, are you going to get a job and that will help you to pay off those student loan debts, but also we're going to match against that. That might, set you up a little bit ahead of another competing employer for talent. So I can see why
Mm,
it's popular. Obviously, popular with anybody who has this debt, and it can allow them to have a participant account. But
mhm.
yeah, the administration part is an
Yeah.
interesting kind of challenge. So we'll see how
Yeah.
that goes. A couple of other smaller components, which probably are not as interesting to most folks. It is going to allow exchange traded funds in variable annuity option plans. Not going to spend too much time talking about that because it's kind of specific. Um, but exchange traded funds are popular, and as are variable annuity options. And there's whole schools of thought on variable annuities, good and bad. And I don't want to get into that here, but that is something in there. Again, that's been talked about before, so we'll see if that ends up in the final bill or not. Last thing I wanted to kind of talk about here is an option. This is an interesting one and one that we kind of struggle with in our audits quite often. Um, is finding lost participants. And which sounds strange. How can you have a lost participant? But I don't know, Karen, you want to talk a little bit about what that means? What is that?
That is when you try to a lot of plans have a mandatory cash out if your account balance is less than $1,000, less than 5,000. 5,000 seems to be the most common one. They force you out and send you a check, or they roll over your account. Well, if they send a check to somebody but they don't have a good address on file and they can't find you, then you're lost. And that money ends up staying in the plan,
Mhm.
and the whole reason for having the mandatory cash out is to get those small account balances out of the plan. Um, so that's what it is. And there's you know some people, they move around a lot, so it's really hard to keep track of them as they move from place to place.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I think this is going to get more important too as that auto enroll feature comes in.
mhm.
Um, it employers are interested in their current employees. So
Yes.
a lost participant is not someone who works for them. They can locate them. That's not a problem. It's once the person leaves employment with
Yeah.
the firm. And they could have worked for you 20 years ago, and you think of all the things that happen. I mean, the person could have
Mhm.
died for all you know, and the funds need to go to a beneficiary. And good luck finding a beneficiary. A lot of times you don't even
Right.
have beneficiaries on file. So it can get very complicated if you've had a lot of turnover, you've not kept track of those people. You're supposed to have procedures in place within the plan to keep track of everyone, not just the people that still work for you, because you're supposed to be giving them notices. They're supposed to
Mhm.
get disclosures and information about the plan, but we all know from real life experience that that doesn't always happen, and so it's very common in our audits for us to see, especially as Karen mentioned, if they're issuing paper checks, that those checks are going to bounce and come back because they never get cashed. And so the
Mhm.
record keeper doesn't really know what to do with them. They end up going all kinds of places into forfeiture, and then they can get used up for other things they shouldn't be. And you still owe these individuals the amount of money that should have been in their account that they never got because they never
Mhm.
cashed the check. We've also seen examples, and it's surprising to me. If it was a $10 check or something, I could see where you can't be bothered to take it to the bank and get it cashed. But I mean, we've seen large checks
Large
that
checks.
never get
Yeah.
cashed, which I for the life of me can't understand. But tens of thousands of dollars of checks that the person just for whatever reason doesn't cash them. So this can be a big problem, and it will cost you money if those funds are still sitting in there, and if you have a record keeper who puts it back in the participant account. I mean, you can end up with hundreds of people that are sitting in this state, and you're paying the fee for those plans, those accounts. You're paying administrative fees for it, so it costs you money,
Mhm.
and it becomes an administrative mess if you ever want to close out the plan or you want to transfer the plan into a different option.
Mhm.
You want to move it from one provider to another. This is all going to rear its ugly head at those points. So, um, and with auto enrollment, it becomes an even bigger problem because you've got an awful lot of
Mhm.
people with potentially with very small
Potentially small.
balances.
Yes, especially in those industries where the turnover is very high.
And the pay is not high.
Yeah.
So we've seen plans that we audit where they'll have hundreds of people with account balances of $5, $10, $15, $7. Um, they don't keep track of those people because their turnover is crazy, and now you've got all these really small balances. But you can't just sheet the funds back to the state. It's not that simple. It becomes a real problem, getting rid of those people, getting rid of those funds, moving them out, especially, like I said, if you want to terminate the plan, transfer it, you get purchased by another firm. It becomes a real nightmare administratively to work that out. So the provision in this proposed law, which again they've been talking about for a long time, is to require the DOL to set up a searchable database of employees. So again, don't know how this would all work, but somehow you would be loading employee information into this database. I don't know if it would like link with Social Security or
It would
there's a
have
pension
to.
benefit guarantee, yeah, which a lot of people aren't going to be in there. But their thought process is to have this database so that if Karen left our employment and 20 years down the road, I've got to pay out Karen and I can't find her. I could go look in this database and oh, there she is. And then I can make arrangements to get her the funds, that she would need. I don't, you know, realistically, is that going to work? I don't know. Kind of depends on how they set it up. It's certainly not going to help with the beneficiary situation because I don't think it's got any provision for, if Karen's
Mhm.
not here anymore, now who do I give the money to? Um, so I don't know. Is it's a good idea. It's a good thought. Is it really workable? I don't know. Um, I can also see there's going to be privacy issues if you've got some
Mhm.
government managed database. We've heard about that on, for a lot of other
Yeah,
different
that's
things.
a lot of people aren't going to like that.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be popular with some groups. So yeah, I don't know. Like I said, this has been talked about before. This may not end up in the final bill, but it is in the current House of Representatives bill. So we'll kind of watch the space and see how that goes. With that, I talked a little bit about where this goes next. It's sitting with the Senate right now. They are discussing it, so it's not like it's dead or anything. It's a current topic. It can go down the path of either just getting voted on as is. That's probably the least likely option. Most likely option is
Mm.
they do a separate bill and then they have to reconcile the two, or they propose changes to it, which again then would have to be reconciled. Of course, then it's got to get voted on by the Senate and whatever, or maybe go back to the House for vote, just depending on if there's reconciliation. Ultimately, the bill then would have to get signed by the president, currently President Biden, of course. Expectations are high that this is going to get done in 2022. So we're not quite halfway through the year yet. So we'll see if that works out. But most of the people watching this say those people that lobby, for things. So I don't know if that's providers, insurance companies. I'm not sure who the lobbyists are lobbying for, but they're really pushing for this. I suppose because it means more business for those folks that administer plans, would be my guess. But anyways, they're really pushing for it. Congress is really anxious to act. This is an area that's very important to them because of the issues with Social Security. So we do expect progress on this. So we'll keep watching this space. Like I said, keep watching for our podcast. Keep watching for our blog posts. We'll keep you posted if any of this piqued your interest. We'll keep you updated on what's going on with it. Karen, any last thoughts before we wrap up today?
Not that I can think of. It'll be interesting to see what happens and see if some of those provisions that seem to be a little difficult, that might be more difficult to administer, or if those make it through, or if somebody mentions, hey,
wait a minute, what about this?
Yeah.
And the Senate tends to have a very different attitude towards things than the House. So I expect there will be definitely changes before we see any kind of final document here. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up for today. I do want to throw out, I'm going to give you my personal email, which is a little different. It's Kim, K-I-M, it's Anders, A-N-D-E-R-S, CPA.com. If you send it to the previous email address, it still works, but that's the current address. It's either Kim or K Moore, so letter K, M-O-O-R-E, or Kim at anderscpa.com. If you have any suggestions for future podcasts, topics you'd like us to talk about, questions about what we talked about today, you'd like to keep posted on what's going on here at Anders, or just in general with the audit group, have 401k audit questions, feel free to give me an email and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have or consider topics for our next podcast. With that, I think we'll wrap up, and thank you everyone for listening.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving 401k audit success. We're here to be a resource with ever-changing rules and regulations.